Hi, everybody. I'd like to welcome you all to the Human Rights Award celebration. And the first thing I would like to do is read a land acknowledgement. And I think you will see a slide for that land acknowledgement coming up soon. So, Rights and Democracy acknowledges the Abenaki people as the traditional land caretakers of Endakinya, which includes parts of Vermont, New Hampshire, New England, and Quebec, as well as the Mohican peoples of southern Vermont. As guests on this unceded territory of those peoples, we honor their ancestors and elders. We appreciate and honor all of their relations, past, current, and future. We also acknowledge that our nation has benefited from the uncompensated and exploited labor represented in the legacy of slavery and the present day reality of migrant farm workers. That being said, I'd like to say, welcome all my relations. And my name is Mary Garish. I am the co-chair of the Rights and Democracy Institute board, along with Andrea Polizo, who you will meet shortly. I was proud to be a part of the founding of Rights and Democracy in 2016. And at that time, we knew that people power could really change the human condition and the environmental condition here in our states of Vermont and New Hampshire, in the country and in the world. So Rights and Democracy of Vermont and New Hampshire is, just as it sounds, a bi-state organization. We're a 501c3 organization, which means that contributions from individuals and funders are tax deductible. This is a really good thing because in garnering the people power to carry out our work, we also need other resources, including financial ones. And if that sounds like a pitch, you're right, it is. We're a nonprofit corporation, and we really appreciate everybody's donation of time, talent, and finances. What we're trying to do here is sort of embraced by the land acknowledgement that we started with, which is that we're trying to unite people while respecting their individuality and their differences of culture and heritage. And we're trying to unite them for the common good and dignity of humanity in general, whether that has to do with housing, with systemic inequality, whether it has to do with the environment. All of those things are all combined. And so we work in a lot of different issue areas. And right now, we're celebrating Human Rights Day. And this is the 72nd anniversary of the United Declaration of Human Rights. In case any of us don't recall, that is a document that was brought forward by Eleanor Roosevelt 72 years ago. And we have to acknowledge that it was unusual for a woman to have the ability to bring this document to the world through the United Nations. And at that time, she was building on the work of the Second Bill of Rights that her then gone husband had started. And this was all about social and economic rights. It was about human dignity and how if each of us, just by virtue of being human, isn't able to name and claim those rights that allow us to live in a dignified manner, we haven't done our job. Now, the United Nations, of course, adopted this, and the United States at that time was very proud to sign on to it. We all know what's been happening recently in terms of human rights in the United States, which is that they're becoming less and less available. That's what makes our work here at Rights and Democracy Institute even more urgent and important in these days. We need the people power to come to the government and say, we're human, we have rights, we should live a life of dignity. And we know that every single one of those human rights, housing, economic security, healthcare, clean water, clean air, racial justice, those all depend on each other, because if one of them is missing, our lives aren't going to be dignified. So that's what I'm proud to say our organization is trying to do. And we are celebrating and uplifting in this event all of those who have contributed in the past year, and probably way beyond that, to the fight for human rights and allowing everyone to name and claim those rights. I would also like to thank our sponsors, and I think we have a slide with their logos so that you can be sure and thank them when you're on Facebook or wherever. Ben and Jerry's Foundation, Planned Parenthood of Northern New England, the Vermont Center for Independent Living, the Renew New England Alliance, and People's Action. And now I have the pleasure and honor of introducing our Executive Director, James Haslam. James.
Good evening, everybody. It's so great to see you all. This is great to have this event across both states and with so many exciting national guests. Mary has been a founding leader, as she said, of Rights and Democracy and the chair of the organization for several years. And thank you so much for the leadership. I'm so excited that many of you are going to get to see many of the Rights and Democracy Institute board members tonight in this event. I want to just go quickly. We're going to pull up the agenda, and I want to give you a sense of the schedule for tonight. It's really exciting. We are going to be able to have a special performance after this welcoming section with the Resistance Revival Chorus of Vermont. We're going to be playing a video of that. We are also going to be able to have an incredible group of folks have a conversation about the human rights in democracy in this moment in our country's history with Kathy Albisa and Alicia Garza and George Goehl, and just incredibly thrilled for that. And we'll hear more about them in a minute. And then we're going to go through the awards for the organizations in New Hampshire and Vermont and some of the national groups that you'll hear from, and we'll have wrap it up with the Resistance Revival chorus. I just want to, you'll hear more about this, but one of the things that we are really thrilled when we invited Alicia, we actually, it was right at the same time we started hearing about her new book, The Purpose of Power. And so, as Mary said, this is a fundraiser, and we have special gifts where anyone who gives $50 or more, we're going to send a copy of this, everyone's books in Brattleboro, Vermont, as a supporter, and they're going to help us make sure that everyone can get a copy of the book. And then also anyone who just donates $30 or more will also have these special face masks, solidarity PPE face masks that we'll send you. So if you haven't yet, I know a lot of folks have already donated, but thank you so much for your support. And with that, I'll just say briefly before we bring on this video, the Resistance Revival chorus was something that was started in New York City. It was started a couple of years ago by a group of organizers and musicians, and it just is a powerful way of bringing art and culture into our movements. And so Nicole Nelson, and other folks, including Julie Wynn, who's a former board member of Rights and Democracy Institute, have been bringing back this group in Vermont and creating a Vermont chapter. And they've wanted to create a partnership with Rights and Democracy Institute. So they recorded these special performances in the middle of this pandemic in a safe way. And we're going to be able to debut them for you here tonight. So no one has seen them beyond the filmmaker and a few of us. And so they were super proud to be able to pull this together in the midst of all this and share it with you tonight. So without further ado, I'll bring it over to the slide for the video for the Resistance Revival Chorus of Vermont. We got that. I know that's transitioning to the video is not always the easiest thing. Welcome everyone joining.
Yeah, whoever just joined, you were the 100th person to jump in here, so welcome.
All right.
Singing together for you, and our motto is that joy is an act of resistance. We got to keep that joy flowing. That's number one. Woo! Woo! This joy that I have, well, they gave it to me. Oh, this joy that I have, the world didn't give it to me. This joy that I have, the world didn't give it to me. The world didn't give it, the world can't take it away. This strength that I have, the world didn't give it to me. No, this strength that I have, the world didn't give it to me. This strength that I have, the world didn't give it to me. The world didn't give it, the world can't take it away. This strength that I have, the world didn't give it to me. The world didn't give it to me. The world didn't give it to me. The world didn't give it, the world can't take it away. Oh, this love that I have, the world didn't give it to me. Oh, this love that I have, the world didn't give it to me. Oh, this love that I have, the world didn't give it to me. Since the world didn't give it, the world can't take it away. Oh, this joy, the world didn't give it to me. Oh, this joy that I have, the world didn't give it to me. Didn't give it to me. The world can't take it away. This joy Let's try. The world didn't give it to me. 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 The world didn't give it. The world can't take it. The world didn't give it. The world can't take it away. One more time. The world didn't give it. The world can't take it away.
Wow, that was just gorgeous. I am hoping you all felt that one in your bones. That was some beautiful, beautiful music that they created right there. And I'm so grateful that we are able to have them be a part of this incredible celebration. I hope you know that this is not done. This is a party. So we are absolutely going to be hearing from the Resistance Revival Chorus again. So you need to stay tuned from the start to the finish. So beautiful. We are so fortunate to have creatives in our lives, and we recognize that there is no revolution without music and dance. We look to our creative centers to help us articulate the many hopes, the dreams, and the demands that our collective liberation requires. It's through the sharing of these arts that we're often better able to speak across divides, hear one another, and give voice to our unique human experiences. We are so fortunate to be in this moment where we are able to have these sorts of gifts come our way. We are also not only fortunate to be in community with artists like these, but we're also to celebrate the artists and creatives that are already within Rights and Democracy. This even includes the recent launch of our own movement media with projects like the Traverse podcast and special collaborations that we've even done with filmmakers in the area, but also working with musicians and artists as the creators who help to inspire and paint the beautiful world that we are all fighting for so we can see a glimpse of what we're actually going to win. So we are also celebrating the transformation of our work through projects like the Catalyst Leadership. Catalyst Leadership is an exciting new project that we unveiled this past weekend that includes the next step in actualizing our theory of change to launch an actual cohort of electeds and community leaders and support their crucial role in our movement work and all the complex components that are necessary for us to truly step into our power. There is so much more you're going to learn about this in the days and weeks and months to come, and we are so excited to share this with you. Now, we're going to hear about also some of the incredible work that we're also able to do with many of our different community partners and national partners. And we're going to be honoring many of those folks tonight. But first, before we begin on that, we're going to hear a conversation with some of our national movement leaders, moderated by Rights and Democracy Board member Kathy Albiza. And I'm honored to introduce each of you to Kathy, George Goehl of People's Action, and Alicia Garza, co-founder of Black Lives Matter. Let me tell you a little bit about these amazing folks. Kathy Albiza is a constitutional and human rights lawyer with a background on the right to health. Kathy's also had significant experience working in partnership with community organizers in the use of human rights standards to strengthen advocacy in the United States and abroad. She co-founded the National Economic Social Rights Initiative along with Sharda Shikan and Liz Sullivan in order to build legitimacy for human rights in all of our different aspects, and especially in the United States. She's also the vice president of Race Forward. She is committed to a community-centered and participatory human rights approach that's both local in its voice, but universal and global in its vision. She's also published books and journals on a wide range of issues, including questions around law enforcement, constitutional strategies, and the relationship between the way the law affects our social movements. She is an amazing, powerful woman with incredible gifts and an artistic and deep soul. So excited to have her here tonight. I also want to introduce you to George Goehl. Now, George, at the age of 21, he walked into a soup kitchen to eat. And over time, he became an employee, first washing dishes and then eventually helping to run the entire soup kitchen. And in 3 years, his time went from seeing folks in line for the food to saying that there needed to be a shift to actually address the root causes of poverty. So George began to organize. And in the wake of our major financial crises, George and National People's Action mobilized people into the streets to demand accountability more than any other organization, helping to win major wins like through the Dodd-Frank financial reform, creating the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and secure mortgage relief for hundreds of thousands of families. Today, George is the director of People's Action, one of the largest multiracial, poor, and working class people's organizations in the country. He's credited with moving the field of community organizing to new levels, increasing emphasis on shaping our worldview, building independent political power, and focusing on long-term vision and strategy. George is a leader in transforming the field of community organizing to increase relevance to emerging social movements, to building electoral powers in our states, and to winning structural change that shifts the balance of power to working class families. He's also originally from Indiana, representing the Midwest. He's a husband, a father, a banjo player, and he makes documentaries about country music. Now about Alicia Garza. So Alicia believes that Black communities deserve what all communities deserve, to be powerful in every aspect of their lives. An author, a political strategist, an organizer, and a cheeseburger enthusiast, Alicia founded the Black Futures Lab to make Black communities more powerful in politics. And in 2018, the Black Futures Lab conducted the Black Census Project, the largest survey of Black communities in over 150 years. She is the co-founder of Black Lives Matter and the Black Lives Matter Global Network, an international organizing project to end state violence and oppression against Black people. The Black Lives Matter Global Network now has 40 chapters in 4 countries. She also serves as the Strategy and Partnerships Director for the National Domestic Workers Alliance, the nation's premier voice for millions of domestic workers in the United States. She's also the co-founder of Supermajority, a new home for women's activisms. Alicia has become a powerful voice in the media and frequently contributes thoughtful pieces on race, gender, sexual orientation, and gender identity. And her work is featured in Time, MSNBC, The Washington Post, The New York Times, The Guardian, Elle, and Essence. And in addition, she's received numerous accolades and recognitions, including Fortune's 40 Under 40, Times 100 Women of the Year list, Glamour's Women of the Year Award, and as the community change agent at BET's Black Girls Rock Awards. Her first book, The Purpose of Power, How We Come Together When We Fall Apart, was released in 2020 with One World. So she shares her thoughts on politics and pop culture as well on her podcast. She is everywhere that we need to be. Alicia does want me to give you this warning. Hashtags don't start movements. People do. Kathy, George, Alicia, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Kaya. I just wrote in the chat, I want to meet that woman you introduced, Kathy Albisa. She seems to have my name, and it's a rare name. She sounds really interesting. Thank you. That was a very gracious and generous introduction. But the 2 people that we're talking to today honestly need very little introduction. They are giants in our movements, Alicia and George, as you've heard. And in a year like 2020, I have no doubt that much has been asked of them. I'm equally sure that this searing experience of helping guide our movements, which they have both done very adeptly, through a pandemic that has surfaced literally life-threatening inequities and an unprecedented autocratic regime that continues to threaten core democratic and social justice values, has provoked and deepened their thinking, which they will generously share with us here today. And we are honored and lucky to have you join us in this conversation. So let me turn to both of you and kick off this conversation with a sort of introductory question, because we all need inspiration. And today is Human Rights Day. We're here to honor and celebrate both historic and current human rights struggles, some of which you both lead. Which ones for you would you name as your inspiration on this Human Rights Day? What most inspires you in a moment like this? What struggles have influenced you? And either feel free, either of you, to jump in first. This is a conversation.
First, hey, Alicia.
Hi, George. Hi, Kathy. It's good to be here with everybody. Those introductions were awesome. I wish I got introduced like that all the time.
So funny. I was thinking I should cut my bio down. It's gotten a little long.
Well, let's jump in. George, take us away.
You know, on this question, I don't know if you'd call it one of the great human rights struggles, but I just keep thinking about the last 10 years. Because if you go back to like 2009, like social movements in this country were far and few between. Like we were not a movement or an organizing sector that was able to move our ideas into the national conversation. It was just really not a thing. We were slugging it out in the neighborhoods. We were maybe organizing against our mayor. And then in the aftermath of the financial crisis, organizing started to take off. People started to question corporate power. I think even started to question capitalism in new ways. And we've had a string of social movements ranging from Occupy to the Dreamers movement, Black Lives Matter, Me Too. We had the Sanders campaign. And I think we're in a period of organizing where like progressives and people that care about social justice and organizers are able to move our ideas into the national conversation. And that is like a huge deal in a very different place than we were 10 years ago. And what I'm most excited about, what comes next, because the challenge is we can move those ideas into the national conversation. We don't know how to make them real in people's lives. And so I feel like for progressives in the left, we're in like a key moment in our learning curve where we want to move beyond like moving ideas into the conversation and maybe even serving them up for the right to kick our ass with them, to figuring out how we're going to take those ideas and make them real in people's lives. I feel like we're on the right track. We're doing all the right things, but what comes next is part of our learning curve.
Thank you. George, Alicia, can you share yours?
Oh, yeah. Well, I could not agree with you more, George, and you beat me to it. That's what I get for serving you up first. I think for me, the thing that I've been really sitting with lately in the movement is the original abolitionist movement and the movement to end chattel slavery in this country. And, you know, I'm just struck by how radical of an idea at that time, not having human beings in bondage and forcing free labor and justifying an unbelievable brutality and violence against human beings, thinking about how radical that was at the time when, you know, Harriet Tubman and John Brown and so many other abolitionists were fighting to end the institution of slavery. And it makes me think a lot about the parallels for today. You know, I'll be honest, I've been up since 5 a.m. and I've been up cussing since 5 a.m. And the reason that I started cussing initially, actually, was, you know, a lot of the conversation that is happening right now around police reform and criminal system reform, and how people cannot wrap their minds, right? Or at least they say they can't wrap their minds around what it would look like to have a different system of public safety in this country, and actually have a system of public safety in this country, which of course we could call a safety net, which of course we could call dignified communities. I mean, we could call it whatever you want. I don't care if you call it defund the police, I really don't. But ultimately, this idea that is being considered as so radical right now, I believe deeply in my soul is going to be not considered that radical 40 years from now. And I'm excited to be alive for that moment, because anybody that knows me knows that I keep receipts. In fact, I feel like I am a Dewey Decimal System of receipts. And I cannot wait for that moment where we say, gosh, remember when human dignity and safety for everybody was such a radical idea? So that's what I'm sitting with now, in addition to all of the things that George just offered, which I 100% co-sign.
Thank you both. You essentially so eloquently told us that we both stand on the shoulder of giants and we are the ones that we have been waiting for. And you know that we've had, that's George, that these discursive, right, victories. And what Alicia's named is how do we then translate them in 40 years from now into a vision that is actualizable? That is our challenge today. So that takes me to my second question, which is, in your book, Alicia, you talk about the need to treat our work as hospice care for that which is dying and prenatal care for that which is being born. So how do we, in this moment of trying to turn discursive victories into actual real life changes, how do we do both of these things at once? We need to defend and protect people, sustain people, and still yet transform into that 40-year vision.
Mhm.
What is your advice to everyone here who's so with you on these visions that you're putting out?
Well, I don't know if I'm in a position to give advice. I will say the things that I have been holding, and the reason that I included that in my book is that I honestly feel that we are moving into a period that we get to shape. And in order for us to shape it in such a way that we advance and not just run ourselves around in circles, I think it requires us to really dig into what are the things that need to die away without intervention, right? So much of what we're grappling with right now, all of these reckonings that are happening, whether it be around race or whether it be around climate or migration or war or policing, right? All of these things, there is an impetus, right, to try to resuscitate things that are not sustainable, things that do not serve us, and to tinker around the edges of making it a little bit more smooth, as opposed to being courageous enough to say, this has to die. This has to die. And the centerpiece of hospice care is non-intervention in the dying process. And so I want us to be thinking about, you know, in our work, what are the things that need that cannot be, what are the things that need to pass away that we will not intervene in the dying process? And how do we communicate that, right? And organize around that? Because I think so much of this stuff is still contested around what actually does need to die away. And, you know, true to form in America, we are not great at dealing with death and dying. And in fact, we call death and dying all kinds of names beyond the ones that they are. And we do the same with systems. And so for me, it's about getting clear about what needs to die and not intervene in the dying process. But then the other piece of it, frankly, and George spoke to this a little bit in his opening comments, is what are the things that we are investing in that are not yet born, but they will be at some point? And what do we want them to look like when they are? And what is sorry to take this metaphor maybe too far, but what is going to be our parenting style, right? Like I think about that in the same way that I think about governance. And I think part of what we're trying to land on here is, you know, we're at this crossroads where, yes, there are things that are dying away, but there are also things that are ready to sprout. And we need to be able to shepherd those things into being and also take ownership of them. And it is the muscle that I think is weakest in our movement, frankly. Like, all of us come into this work having a deep sense of what needs to go away. And we have to build the muscle of being able to continue to articulate, what are we building? What are we bringing forward? And that is actually what we organize people around. It is what gets people out of bed every single day, knowing that there's something that they can't yet see, but they can feel it sensorily. That is what motivates people and moves people towards change.
So George, these are some very small and simple themes: political death, rebirth, and then growth. How do you see the cycle and how we move it forward?
Oh, good Lord. Yeah, I think I think we're in a hell of a moment. And I think what Alicia talked about in her opening comments, it's like that we are in the process of becoming America. I think it's actually happening right now in like really beautiful and profound ways. And I just think alone both the reaction to the murder of George Floyd and just as importantly, the reaction to the protests in response to the murder of George Floyd were much different than they were following Ferguson. And I feel like we're seeing signs of awakening happening with huge parts of the population in the country. So I think we're like deep in the most potent moment in US history of becoming America. And I think it's going to constantly be met with backlash. And we know that. And so I think we have to be able to be very clear on the moments where we are having big breakthroughs and that we are on the path of becoming an America that's truly reckoned with its history of racism and genocide. And we have to figure out how we pull as many people along for that ride as possible, and get to the other side with more grace and less carnage than we might otherwise. And I think it's going to require a different kind of fighting. Like, I think I come out of a history of like going toe to toe with the banks and big corporations and doing a lot of direct action. And I still think all of that is critical and needed now more than ever. But I think to win the project of becoming America, it's going to require a different kind of organizing that really goes out and tries to connect with a lot of people that don't see themselves as part of our movement, that aren't connected to the left or to progressives or to organizing and helping make meaning of the changes in the country, the changes to our economics, our demographics and whatnot. And that's a different kind of organizing than I think a lot of us are groomed for. But I think if we could figure that out, I think we're gonna win a lot more stuff when we get to the other side with a lot more grace and beauty.
You make me think, George, about Vincent Harding's question, is America possible? And you imply that we are in fact trying to answer that right now. And you flag the need for grace, right? In that process of letting something die and getting to the other side to make it as gentle a death as possible. That's what I'm sort of pulling from here. So, but you also note that we need a type of organizing that is meaning making, right? We need to create meaning that is a refounding of the country. What are those elements that as organizers we need to engage, I ask you both, to create that kind of meaning when we're not just fighting, we're actually, and not even just building, but we're actually founding something new?
You know, I'll start. And I'm going to start by lifting up George's better half. You'll appreciate that, George.
Always.
Ai-jen Poo, who I've had the honor of working with for, God, well, almost 2 decades now. So there's that on that. And, you know, Ai-jen, I think, is somebody in my life who has really made me believe that, yes, we can become the America that we have been promised. And that ability to do that is actually in our hands. And I was somebody who I realized after, you know, knowing Ai-jen and really letting her organize me, which is no small feat, I realized that so much of how I had been in this work for so long was from a place of not believing that change was possible. And how ironic is it to be in this work of change every single day, but not actually believe in it. And it made me think a lot differently about then what is required of us to make America possible. And for me, so much of that is both based in the things that George just talked about in terms of expanding how we understand who we need to be in this moment, but also expanding how we understand who is the we. And it is a question that I think our movements are frankly too ambivalent about. I talk about this in the book too, that I think after 20 years of doing this work, my most successful campaigns were the ones that brought people together that nobody ever thought would be on the same side. And that is what influences how I think about who we need to be now, but it also influences how I think about how we become the we that we need to be. And so much of that, I think, is about really focusing again on uprooting the cynicism that I think lives inside of all of us and replacing that cynicism with innovation and creativity. Honestly and truly, to be able to believe that America is possible means that we have to become different kinds of architects. And if we're not the kind of people that can not only craft and shape when we're not totally sure what the finished product is going to be, and bring people along for that process and dive into the places where people have been left out and left behind, not just by rigged rules, but by our movements. If we can't do that, I agree with George 100%, we won't be able to make America possible. But if we can do that, then we will take our rightful place in history as the architects of what America was supposed to be in the damn first place.
George, I encourage you to follow up on that and tell us
I
how
don't
we
even remember what
make
the
meaning
question
in
was.
America possible.
Oh yeah. You know, Vincent Harding also said, like, I'm a citizen of a country that does not yet exist, a country we still have to create. And I think, like, clearly we're in that project. I mean, I really think about Rights and Democracy as an organization that's based in two states that have big rural populations, have a lot of white folks in it. And I think Rights and Democracy has a really critical role to play in creating a model for other folks in the country. And just to be upfront, like, I feel like somebody's got to figure out how we're going to organize some of the struggling white folks in this country to be part of the project of becoming America. Because if we don't organize them, then we've learned the hard way somebody else is going to do it. And I was just saying that I think, like, on the left, we tend to, like, not be that sophisticated when we think about white folks. Like, and I think of we have really 4 white economies in the US. Like, I would say one being the 1%, or just folks that are doing really, really well, to say the least. And then there's still ascending white folks, of which there, people who still benefit from the systems of capitalism and racism. And those folks range from really progressive to conservative. And then the two categories I think we have to think about how we're organizing better is the third category I would call the fallen, people that we maybe used to call the white working class or even the middle class, who've really fallen from grace. A lot of those union jobs and other things that help move people into the working and middle class, they're not a thing anymore. And that's one of the classes of white folks I come from. Those aren't people that really built a lot of durable wealth. It was really able to wipe it out in a generation or two. And then we never talk about the 18 million white folks that live in poverty. And I think to build the movement that's going to become America, we have to decide how we're going to engage some of these folks in the categories I would call the fallen and among the forgotten. But how we do it matters. And there's some folks that say we can go get the white people by like dodging race, dodging immigration, speaking to the lowest common denominator. And, my answer to that is we've tried that for the last 40 years and here we are. And then the second would be to write those folks off, which I think is just actually both. I question from a moral perspective and from a strategy perspective. There are 60 million folks in the country that live in rural communities. I don't want to give the other side a 60 million person lead. I'm not willing to do that. But whatever we do, it has to be race conscious, multiracial organizing. And I think if we do that and we engage in that, we double down on it, we're going to bring a lot more people along for the ride of becoming America.
Thank you, George. And you touched on a question that I was actually just about to, you read my mind, lean into. How does a state like, organizing in states like Vermont and New Hampshire fit in, small states with white rural populations? So I'm going to ask you to touch on the same thing, Alicia. George has noted that we have done one of two things over and over again, expecting a different result, and we know what that means, right? Either pitching to the lowest common denominator or writing people off. What does the alternative look like? What does it mean in rural white areas to do race conscious organizing? And what does that look like to you from someone who's been deeply embedded in the racial justice movement and in Black communities?
Okay, Kathy, come on and ask the hard questions now.
Well, you answered all the easy ones without even breaking a sweat.
Okay, well, I'm sweating now. No, I'm just kidding. Well, here's the thing. Let me start from a different premise. Rural communities, and George has taught me this, rural communities are comprised of Black people too. Black folks and white folks and Latinx folks and Asian folks, like folks live in community together. And I think one of the big challenges that we have is that we kind of don't know our country. And I think what George is asking us to do is be a non-colonizing explorer. And so for me, what that makes me know, right, is that so much of how we talk about communities that have been left out and left behind, we assign urban communities to Black folk, right? And we assign rural communities to white folk, as opposed to trying to dig underneath that and say, where are people living and why? What is the state of their lives? What are the things that they long for? And how can we figure out how to connect them in our movements, knowing that there are millions of people out there for whom they are unhappy with the state of the quality of their life. And as George said, there are other people getting to them first because we have left a lot on the table. And that is not just true about white folks, right? That's true about rural communities, as George said. And it's definitely true about Black folks. George and I have talked about this a ton, and I feel like, we're always on these it's now endless Zoom calls. Before it was endless meetings, being on planes, trains, and buses and automobiles. But we're like high-fiving each other under the table because you have to keep making these interventions that organizing is a science and it's an art. And part of the science of organizing is knowing your folks and it's knowing where your people are, it's understanding what they care about, and it's understanding what moves them. But the other part of it is really understanding the art of how it is that we bring together all of these people from different experiences, different backgrounds, with a common interest for change. And for me, I'm focused on building power in Black communities and building a powerful part of the multiracial movement for a multiracial democracy. Black folks have to be a critical piece of that. And I have chosen to take on this question of how do we make Black folks more powerful in that coalition so that there can be a coalition? And I think George similarly has taken on this question of, well, how do we take on what is keeping white folks from being a part of a multiracial movement for a multiracial democracy? And it is only once we have unlocked that we can actually build the movement that we need to be. And I underscore and underline that because I wonder if sometimes we start from the wrong place, right? I wonder if sometimes we start from the wrong place as opposed to starting from, here's where we're ultimately trying to go, and here's what it's going to take to get us there. I think, and what I know from all of my relatives that live in rural communities, is that people are already in relationship to each other. They are already working in the same places. They're eating at the same restaurants. They're, exchanging cups of flour and sugar, right? That is already happening. But what is intervening is the stories that they see on television, the stories that they hear in their car on the way to the gatherings that they're having right now, that are about why we shouldn't do what we're already doing. They're about how, one of us is taking something that somebody else deserves. And we haven't figured out as a movement how to honestly and truthfully intervene in that. So much of what we do is say, don't say that, that's mean. and that's not actually giving people a sense of why it's happening. And it's also not giving people a sense of who's to blame. And if we don't replace the story of who's to blame with corporate power, right? And the failed project of white supremacy, then that leaves a lot of room for people to put all kinds of other stuff in there. So for me, how our liberation is tied to each other, frankly, is the same as what's the strategy for us to get there. And what I know is that if we are going to be powerful together, we need to strengthen our troops and our forces. You can't go to battle without an army. And I think about this a lot when it comes to Black folks. I'm like, yo, they're coming for us, but we are not on the same page about what needs to get done. I know George has been like, okay, rural folks, they're coming for us, but we are not on the same page about what needs to be done. Once we've made some advances there, we can actually be so powerful together, but it requires a both and, in my opinion. I hope that made sense, Kathy, and I'm still sweating.
Almost too much sense. It was extraordinary. I love that you keep naming how you and George learn from each other. And at the same time, you know that we don't even know our own damn country. And what that says to me is you two are modeling something that we need to spread around. How do we become a learning, like we talk about learning organizations, how do we become a learning country, right? Where we learn from each other as well as learn about each other. And how do we parlay that? And it's going to be my last question for you both, because you have named the power of cultural narratives, right? And how currently it sort of shrinks the parameters of the possible. They talk about the power of being able to define reality as one of the highest forms of power and have other people respond as such. How do we do our work in this space you just named, the space of cultural narrative? How do we learn from each other so that we build that power to define reality and have, especially our vision of multiracial democracy, and have others respond as such? I'll leave this as my last question because I could talk to y'all till midnight, but our time is up. So take it home with that really, really important question. And I assure you, everyone here will take it to heart and hold it and take it into their work.
Alicia, I'll go and then you can wrap us up. I feel like you got your next book title, Go Meet Your Own Country, damn it. I think that's, you don't write it, I want to write it.
Well done.
And write it together. You could write it together. Yeah, what a piece that would be.
That'd be, yeah, there's a lot of beat the endless meetings and Zoom calls. And then just to say what I love about your book is it's a book about organizing, really. I feel like there's other books you could have written and maybe even might have been more, sold more books, but you wrote the book you wanted. It's about organizing, about meeting making, about strategy. I told you the other day, I was like, man, you were paying way better attention to MTV than I was, because you were waking through MTV, and I was like, damn, Whip It, that is a cool song. I just say this, I think, Kathy, it's like what Alicia was hitting on. It's regardless of race, it's good organizing. We start where people are at, and we don't judge people by where they start. It's about where they might end up in the journey of organizing that matters most. And the starting point's different for everybody. But Alicia, something you said on a call the other day, I can organize Black progressives, or I can organize the Black community to be more progressive. And that has hung with me big. And I feel like we're trying to do that in rural communities. So I just think we got to get back to an organizing that starts where people are at, recognizes people's pain, but has every intention of moving people along a meaning-making journey that makes people more woke along the way. And we know how to do that organizing. I think we just kind of got to get back to it.
Oh yeah, George. I agree, as per usual, 100%. And there's a couple of things I've been noodling on recently that, bear with me, they're not fully formed, but this is my gut. It's my gut instinct. The stories that we tell each other and that we are told completely shape our lives. And they don't just shape our lives, but they shape the rules that govern our lives. And I talk about this in the book, in the sense that, the way that we make meaning of what's happening around us is an arena that we can control. And as I was coming up in organizing work, I was always taught that, you know, implicitly mostly, but sometimes explicitly, I was always taught that the culture work is like the soft, fluffy, non-work. And really you had to be material. You had to do the political organizing because nobody cared about culture. And I was the jerk that was like, I care about culture. I care a lot about pop culture. It's how I make meaning of the world. It's how I started to understand politics. And frankly, it's how I connect with people out on the doors because nobody, unfortunately, nobody wants to talk to me about Gramsci. People want to talk to me about Real Housewives of Atlanta. And so I have to actually be able to speak many different languages at once. So for me, I think we just cannot leave that arena uncontested. And as I've said a couple of times now, I think we are entering a new period of culture wars. And there is a fight to make sense of who we are as a nation and who we can be. And it would be a grave error for our movements to leave anything else on the table for the other side to devour. And I can tell you, it is a place that we are losing, 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 losing. How do I know that? Because I spend way too much time on social media. And unfortunately, everybody's opinions that they have about Black Lives Matter or defund the police, or even just me, myself, they tag me in. So I read everything, even though I don't respond. And I will tell you that the narratives that carry and have carried in this period, and it's been 10 years, is that the radical socialist liberals, which is so frustrating to me because I believe words mean things and there's no such thing as that. But anyways, that the radical socialist liberals are coming to take everything that you've worked so hard for. And especially those BLM people, they are coming to take your stuff. We haven't figured out what stuff yet, but we're coming apparently to take your stuff. And so that is why white people need to take up arms and defend themselves and defend their stuff. That is the narrative that is holding right now. And I think that we have to actually take up this work. I love to ignore things like that, but I can tell you that it is proliferating at like mushroom speed because of the internet and because of social media and because of algorithms and because of corporate power. Literally, they have built vehicles to disseminate messages and frames and worldviews at warp speed. And we have to contest with that. We do not have a choice. Lastly, I will say here, for me, I really feel that part of how we get in that space is start to interrupt the fairy tales that we tell each other and ourselves about change and how it happens, about who we are, about how big we are, about how many people we've touched, right? Like, I'm not for, and I'm just going to say this, and sorry, I am who I am. I am not for Joe Biden's campaign of reconciliation because it doesn't have a truth component. And that's the whole model. You have to tell the truth in order for people to come back together again. So why don't we start with us? Let's tell new stories about how change happens and about who are the superheroes of this moment. And our work is about helping every single person in this country see that they can be the superhero in their own story. And we can do that from a number of different angles, but we have to commit ourselves to it. So that, I think, is our task right now.
Wow. Well, I was on a meeting the other day when someone literally said, tell the truth and shame the devil. So some things they are eternal, right?
That's right.
And some of the profound advice both of you are giving us is in fact eternal. Don't leave anything on the table. Don't let them be 60 million ahead. We cannot be so precious that we don't do our work in the way that we need to do it, because we are building a new narrative for multiracial democracy. And I cannot thank you both enough as being two of our leaders in this space, modeling for us, teaching us. We love your book, Alicia. We love your organization, George. We are profoundly grateful to the two of you. And I am so privilege and honor to have been part of this conversation tonight. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kathy. Great questions.
Well, thank
Oh,
you.
right. I'm sorry. I got so excited. I literally like was absorbing the end of this conversation. I forgot I have to transition to what's next. I blame you both. I actually get to introduce one of the superheroes now, of force, and a core leader at one of the strongest red chapters in New Hampshire, Andrea Polizos, one of our co-chairs. So handing it over.
Thank you, Kathy. Yes, I'm Andrea Polizos. I am the New Hampshire co-chair of Rights and Democracy Institute and very active in the Monadnock region of New Hampshire. I want to thank Alicia, George, and Kathy. That was amazing. I have a lot to think about and chew on for the time to come. I need to stop my video, I think. Can you hear me? Oh, is it working? Okay. Awards, I'm going to start the award part. Awards are given to leaders of local, regional, and national organizations who've made significant contributions to the movement for human rights and democracy. We believe strongly in the power of collective action. Any individuals honored are recognized for their role within an organization or a group that is engaged in concerted action for advancing or protecting human rights and democracy. We lift up individuals, groups, and organizations who collaborate with the Rights and Democracy Initiative to advance our mission, and with whom we hope to build the movement for human rights and democracy. Each year, we honor groups from Vermont, New Hampshire, and national movement organizations and funders also. This year, we're thrilled to announce some incredible organizations, and I'm excited to introduce to announce the first 2020 Human Rights Awards to 3 of the Black Lives Matter New Hampshire chapters. Black Lives Matter Nashua will be represented by Jordan Thompson. BLM Manchester will be represented by Erica Perez. And BLM Seacoast will be represented by Tanisha Johnson. In the wake of the murders of Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and George Floyd, young Black leaders stepped up in an unprecedented way to stand against police brutality and the structural racism embedded in our criminal legal system. Black Lives Matter Nashua, Black Lives Matter Manchester, and Black Lives Matter Seacoast were founded by dedicated Black Granite Staters who know that New Hampshire is not innocent of implicit bias and systemic racism. These newly formed chapters quickly organized the largest marches and rallies that our state has ever seen throughout the summer, and they continue to organize, educate, and push for social and policy change in inspiring and strategic ways. So I turn it to Jordan Thompson, Erica Perez, and Tanisha Johnson.
Wonderful. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, wonderful. I want to start off by congratulating my fellow BLM chapters, Manchester and Seacoast, on a lot of great work done over this incredibly challenging year. Erica, Tanisha, I know Renell Cello is on the call as well. You've all been a pleasure to organize with, and I think our BLM family in New Hampshire is strong. Additionally, I'd like to thank the Rights and Democracy Institute for this award. It's such an honor to share the space with so many powerful voices, and we're so grateful for the opportunity. I'd like to thank the organizers at BLM Nashua, Samantha, Kurt, and Jaden for all of the hard work that they've done and the support that they have attributed since this chapter was launched. I would also like to thank, though I'm not sure that she's still with us, the incomparable Alicia Garza, who is a civil rights icon in her own right, for being with us tonight. I want to go on to say that organizing for racial justice in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds is a very difficult task, especially in a state like New Hampshire. But we're here. I really loved what Alicia had to say earlier about Black folks in these communities. I think we just need to be very blunt and speak truth. You know, we hear a lot about the white working class, but Black folks are here too. You know, we're here, we're present, we're organizing, don't erase us. And of course, if you've attended any of our rallies or protests, you've probably heard the phrase, New Hampshire is not innocent. And it's true. There's a lot of work that lies ahead of us, but we're here and we're doing it and we're committed to it. So many people on this call exemplify what it means to show up for Black lives, and for that, we're truly grateful. We hope you'll continue to show up for Black lives and say the names of people like Breonna Taylor, Casey Goodwin, Anita Pop, and so many others whose lives have been taken or impacted by police violence and white supremacy in this country. Thank you, and with that, I will pass it on to Erica Perez.
Hi. I wrote down what I was going to say. So first, I want to thank RAD for giving all of the BLM chapters an award in New Hampshire. I think that that's really cool. But I also want to thank people just for being here as individuals outside of their organizations, because I think that if you are always pulling up to an event like this as your organization, then maybe your heart isn't in organizing as much as it used to be. It might be something to think about. So BLM Manchester was founded in 2016 because a few high school age people needed somewhere to be upset, and we needed somewhere to grieve. There was never an intention to be an organization, but in 2020, after the murder of George Floyd, we came back and we stayed. We took the conversation around racial justice into our own hands in a way that our state hadn't before. It's hard to organize around your identity, and it's hard to try and make people understand that you matter. I want to personally thank BLM Manchester and the people in it, Ronel Chella, Mohammed Al-Hassan, Terrell Whitted, for their bravery, for their effort towards the work, and for being my community in the third whitest state in the United States. I want to end my speech by acknowledging the murder of Casey Goodson in Columbus, Ohio on Friday. May he rest in peace, and may it be acknowledged that we organize because people are dying, and that never becomes easier. And I hope that in collaboration with BLM Nashua and BLM Seacoast, we can continue to spread awareness and fight for change. Something that I didn't write down, but I feel like needs to be said, because I heard the word hero. And I just want to say that so often, the really hard work is put on people who are affected by it the most. And that is a hard situation to be in. And that is a hard situation to be amplified in, if that makes sense. There are no heroes in this work. There are only people affected by really harsh and cruel laws and a really harsh system that we've been born into. And I genuinely want to thank all of the different people in the BLM chapters, because they have brought me a strength that I did not have before this. And they have brought me peace and community. And that's what organizing is really all about. But I'll pass it on to Denisa Johnson from BLM Seacoast.
Hi, everyone. I am still taking in the conversation between Kathy, Alicia, and George earlier. That was just powerful and inspirational. But I will keep mine brief because Erica and Jordan said all the great things, and I won't repeat what they said already. But when Clifton and I chose this path, we knew it would be a strenuous one, especially here in New Hampshire. I mean, here we are tonight honoring the 72 years of the Declaration of Human Rights, yet currently we are still fighting for basic human rights. You know, we receive a lot of criticism and questions for this movement, but we continue to push forward. And like was said earlier, we did stop reading the comments and stop responding to them as well. But as I've heard said before, if you have criticism of our movement, then I hope you also have critique for the oppression. We do this work not for the gratitude, but for the demands of change. And every initiative we have and will continue to put forth will be to decrease those forces that were designed to bring us down and to increase opportunities to build up our community. And let me say, we are all just beginning, and we will continue this fight for Black lives. I want to say thank you to Alicia and the other founders of BLM for your courage, education, and inspiration in creating this movement. We would not have this strength and voice without yours. Thank you to my BLM brothers and sisters in Manchester and Nashua for starting this movement in New Hampshire. You guys are my family and I love you. And then also I want to say thank you to the BLM Seacoast team, as we would not be able to do any of this without them. And thank you to Rights and Democracy for honoring BLM Seacoast and the other chapters with this award. It is greatly appreciated.
I'm just gonna clap until whoever's next gets to speak.
Woo! Thank you so much. Congratulations.
Good, good, good.
Congratulations. Now we're going to go to Sefakor, who is going to introduce our next awardees. Thank you so much, Sefakor.
Thank you, Kaya. I'm Sefakor Komabupome, the Independent Living Coordinator for Vermont Center for Independent Living, and also a board member of Rights and Democracy. I must say that I'm so honored to be on this platform, especially to get more energy, more power, because we know this type of work is quite exhausting. So thank you, Alicia, George, and our interviewer. So I will present to those who have actually won the award on the grassroots level, basically around intersectionality and why intersectional justice is key to human rights for all. This award is actually going to the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, that is NAACP chapters in Rutland and Windham counties, specifically to Tabitha Moore and Stephen Goehl. Across Vermont, New Hampshire, and communities across this country, the fight for racial justice has taken center stage, and there are many emerging groups worth recognizing. What is often less noticed is the critical organizing and advocacy work that happens in the lead up to this moment. Just like the civil rights organizers in the 1940s and the 1950s blazed the trails for powerful movements of the 1960s, I think the work of the Vermont NAACP chapters that started in 2016 was critical to the emergence of the green movement to stop the epidemic of anti-Black violence in this country. We honor them for their groundbreaking leadership on numerous human rights and support of a broad range of grassroots movements fighting for intersectional justice. The tireless efforts of these volunteer-led organizations have helped raise the awareness of the devastating impact of racist ideas and racist policies on everyone in our communities. Your grassroots work and the work of racial justice movement across these countries is critical to push policymakers at the local, state, and federal level to boldly and strategically enact comprehensive and sustainable change to reduce racial disparities. Thank you so much for doing your work, Tabitha, and then Stephen. We acknowledge your great work. Thank you.
Thank you. Took me a minute to get on, couldn't find the mute button. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Good. So first and foremost, I just want to say thank you to RAD for having us, and thank you for this award. It's really humbling just to be able to even receive a human rights award. Just in the name itself speaks volumes. I would also like to, of course, thank my sister president, Tabitha, who I think has helped make all this work possible, and also my branch executive committee members, which are so many and have been so great. And some of them are actually part of RAD Vermont. So I love the cross-sectionality. I guess I could say a lot of things today, but with my 1 to 2 minutes, keeping it short, I think what I would like to say is 3 things. And the first thing is that, and this is to specifically my folks from the African diaspora or the continent, right? And that is, Black mental health is American mental health. And I want us all to remember that and to kind of take a second and sit with that, right? So not only were our ancestors enslaved in this nation, but then we came out of that enslavement and we built it, right? And so our spirit is what maintains it. We are the conscience of this nation. And so the reason I say that is because we have to take care of ourselves. We have to look at our own mental health so that we can be the change agents that we were meant to be. And I want us to recognize that it is our time, and that all of those things that were said before by Alicia and all of those other great speakers are not only speaking through us, but are, who we are charged to be. We are those agents of change. I think the next thing that I would say is that we need to re-examine our relationships with humility, right? So we talk a lot about what the work is and how the work is supposed to be done. But if you ask me, I think that we should be leading it. I think that we should be standing out strong. And there's been so many times when we've been told that we shouldn't, right? Through one message, via external or covert. And I'm here to say, erase that. Don't be humble in that way. Push yourself out there and do more. And I guess the last thing I would say before I pass it over to Tabitha is to remember your ancestors. Look deep, find one ancestor. It doesn't matter where they came from. And channel their strengths and let it propel you forward. And so I guess that's all I have to say other than thank you. And I look forward to continuing the work with everybody. I look forward to being on the ground and also on the state level and national level as well. So without further ado, I guess I will pass it over to Tabitha. Where are you at, Tab?
I'm right here. I got you. Hi, everyone. I'm Tabitha Moore. Like Stefan, I'm so grateful to be here with you tonight, and so happy to be doing this work with all of the amazing people that we've heard from tonight. It's an incredible, humbling honor in the way that it should be. But I totally agree with my brother president, Stefan, that at some point that humility needs to be set aside to speak our truth to power, to recognize that we know what we're talking about. We've been living this for centuries, and our ancestors stand behind us in everything that we do. When I started this branch in 2016 here in Rutland, I had no clue what I was doing. I had no idea what was going to happen. And, I know people like Ida B. Wells and W.E.B. Du Bois had started this. And I'm like, who am I to try to be in their image? But if it's not us, who's it going to be, right? It is us. So, the NAACP is the nation's oldest nonpartisan civil rights organization. And I think part of the reason it has endured so long is because they have been interracial. They have known the whole time that if we are to be effective, that we have to work across difference. And a lot of that means challenging white folks. And something for us in Vermont and New Hampshire that we absolutely need to be proud of in our work is the fact that we are doing it in 2 of the whitest states. It was funny. I don't remember who it was. Was it Tanisha earlier that was talking and said, New Hampshire's third? And I was like, oh, we got them beat, And it's like, wait a second for a minute. When you're doing this work with all surrounded by 96% white people, you are swimming with sharks and you are cut all the time. And so to be that fearless, to be that bold, you need your family around you to do that. And so I feel like I've been incredibly blessed in that regard. And every night when we go to bed, we always wonder, did we do enough? Have we done enough today? And so to be here with you tonight, to look around and say, we're doing something and we're doing enough for today, it is an incredible honor. So I just want to thank you all for this opportunity. And just a little plug, you can always become a member of the Rutland or the Windham area branch of the NAACP. You just go to our websites and just member today. You can be a member of both. It doesn't matter. And I'd also like to thank Rights and Democracy specifically for their support of me. Over the last 8 months, my family and I have endured some pretty horrific racial harassment. Kaya Morris, Mia Schultz, James Haslam have reached out to me and done some really incredible work to support my family through that. And as I have transitioned into a new home, I am happy to welcome Rights and Democracy Institute's Mia Schultz into the position as president-elect of the Rutland area branch. And I so look forward to working with her and Stefan and Rights and Democracy moving forward. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And then one last little thing is, I want to tell those in New Hampshire to reach out to us because we should be working together.
Truth. We'll work with anybody. We're like that.
We're like that.
Fantastic, thank you. Up next, we have Travin, who's going to help us honor the Green Mountain Mask Makers. Travin?
Sorry, but I think I'm off of mute now. And I'm Travin, Alicia, I'm a co-founder of Rights and Democracy. And I'm really excited to be introducing Vicki Lepron of the Green Mountain Mask Makers. And so Rights and Democracy, our mission, we believe that we can secure our human rights through collective action to organize in our workplaces, in our communities, to demand policies that respect and protect the basic needs of our communities. We also recognize that in order to protect human rights, especially in a time of multiple crises like this, we've got to take action to provide our own community solutions, and which is something that Green Mountain Mask Makers has taken up. As we know, we live in a time of intersecting crises, and it's a time when the economic system itself is trying to isolate all of us. But our values are ones of social solidarity. We talk about physical distancing, but it's social solidarity that's in our DNA. And it's how we've gotten this far. 2020, this past year has been a year where social solidarity has been more critical than ever in response to the pandemic. And we've seen an incredible outpouring of collective action across our communities and across the country, indeed. So Rights and Democracy members and our supporters joined, and in many cases led local mutual aid groups and efforts to deliver food to help people with the basic needs in many ways. There are many groups that have done incredible work over the last several months, and we expect that there's going to be a need for more. And we wish we could recognize all of them, but we were really inspired, particularly inspired by Vicki and the crew at the Green Mountain Mask Makers. It's 100% volunteers, and their effort has created, I believe, something like over 7,000 masks, supplying veterans, seniors, nurses, healthcare workers, health clinics, teachers, students, childcare facilities, the most vulnerable, and to be available at the local food pantries. And I want to thank Vicki for your work and the work of all the folks who work with you at the Green Mountain Mask Makers. Vicki?
Thank you, Travin, for that wonderful introduction. I wanted to start out by thanking James Haslam and Rights and Democracy. I'm honored to accept this award on behalf of Green Mountain Mask Makers. It's been a real group effort. We all worked many hours to make sure that the needs of people in our town and state were met. We saw that the nurses, doctors, and members of our community were struggling for PPE. Several of us started making masks to try to meet that need. We wanted to make sure that they were free to all folks because we didn't want money to be a barrier to health. We had originally each posted them on Facebook separately. Then Dr. Avery Woods saw the posts and suggested we come together to expand our ability to meet the needs of our community. So we formed Green Mountain Mask Makers. It was then that we realized the overwhelming need for all of these masks. We started filling orders from doctors' offices, the hospital, schools, and many different community organizations, including the Bennington Interfaith Council, the Free Clinic, Project Against Violent Encounters, the Food Bank, churches, the Vermont Veterans Home, and individual families. We did make more than 7,000 masks. We made 7,123 masks. At one point, we had all of us, most of us were quilters. We had each used all of our individual quilting stashes. And I don't know if any of you know quilters, but you know that our quilting stash is something that we guard. We guard it, we stack it up, we make quilts, and we buy more fabric. In order to continue to meet the important health needs of our community, we needed to raise funds. We realized that people power was crucial. Equally important was having resources to purchase the fabric. I've lost my place. And the community just stepped up when we asked and told them about the need. We were able to purchase fabric with funds that we had raised. And then I thought about it in relation to the work that we do at Rights and Democracy. It's people power that has to be supported financially. That's what we do at Rights and Democracy. We step up to meet needs and give those who feel voiceless the opportunity to get their needs met. We can only do that by coming together, because we know that together we win. Thank you.
If I can interject 2 seconds. Also, there's so many amazing mask makers who did this all over, and just want to give a quick shout out to Heather Stockwell and the Monadnock region mask makers, to Tess George and the Nashua area mask makers, Melissa Heimbach in the Concord area, probably a lot more who did this all over the place. So everyone who did this, just like give yourselves a huge round of applause. And Vicky, I miss you, I love you, thank you. Sorry to jump in, but just so many people did incredible work on keeping our community safe this year.
Hi, I'm Annalise Orlick, and I'm a RDI board member. I want to thank James Haslam for drawing me in and patiently helping me to learn about all the amazing work that RAD does, and Kate Logan for taking me around the Capitol when we were working on living wage campaigns back in a couple of years ago, and also in Vermont and in New Hampshire. So it's an honor to be part of this group. Happy Hanukkah, everyone. It's the first night of Hanukkah, and I think we're lighting some really inspiring menorahs tonight. Obviously, it's not just a Jewish tradition, but there's Diwali, Kwanzaa, Christmas. Most faith traditions recognize the need to think about light at this moment when the days are shortest and the darkness sometimes feels overwhelming. And I think that all of the honorees tonight are really beautiful candles and fighters for the return of the light. I have the privilege of introducing the next honoree, Rebecca Dixon of the National Employment Law Project. And the National Employment Law Project is an organization that has been an incredible resource to a movement that is really near and dear to my heart, and that is the low-wage worker struggles over the last 40 years and intensively over the last 8 years for living wage, for decency in working conditions, safety, union rights, and respect. And NELP has done an incredible job. And I want to, one of the things that Hanukkah celebrates is not only fighting against depression, but miracles, and makes clear that miracles are not handed down by some godlike hand out of the sky. They're fought for and won with incredible hard work and faith. And that is what the workers' rights movement has been doing in this country. One little statistic to note that the low-wage workers movement in just 4 years between 2012 and 2016 won itself 12 times the amount in increased wages that Congress gave it the last time it raised the national wage in 2007. So it's an inspiring movement, and Rebecca Dixon, who is the new executive director of the National Employment Law Project as of January of this year, is an inspiring leader. NELP has been advancing the rights of working people for a very, very long time, 50 years. It was one of RDI's first national partners. They've played a critical role partnering with grassroots organizations and unions in advancing efforts to raise the minimum wage around the country, and partnered also with the crucial Fight for 15 movement that has really begun to win, in some cases, a fairer economy, even in the age of the gig economy and the decline and erosion of workers' rights and stuck wages. So after years of having bills vetoed by various governors, in January 2020, the Vermont legislature finally was able to override a veto and pass a bill to raise the minimum wage to $12.55 per hour in 2022. We all know that's not nearly enough. The struggle has to continue, and NELP is working incredibly hard on that struggle, as are so many of the people in this room and so many RDI partners. NELP worked with RDI to release a groundbreaking new vision called A New Social Contract for Workers. It outlines bold, transformative policies that reimagine workers' rights in the 21st century. And it's really, it's inspiring to look through. Rebecca Dixon took over as executive director of NELP at the beginning of this year, succeeding Christine Dixon, who in her 12 years of leading NELP doubled its membership and really helped it become a key resource for workers across the country in the struggle for a living wage, union rights, and safer working conditions. Raised in rural Mississippi, Rebecca Dixon has been an advocate for racial and economic justice for a very long time, understanding and articulating how deeply intertwined those issues are, how inextricable, in fact. During the Great Recession and its aftermath, Rebecca was a leader in winning unprecedented expansions of unemployment insurance coverage in 20 states and multiple extensions of federal emergency unemployment benefits for long-term unemployed workers. Altogether, these efforts benefited more than 20 million workers nationwide. That's quite a legacy. Before joining NELP, Rebecca did critical work in Mississippi, including as a senior policy analyst at the then new Mississippi Economic Policy Center, where she advocated for economic advancement of families with low incomes and fought to refine and reshape adult education policies, workforce training, post-secondary education policies, and to increase funding for childcare for low-income moms, temporary assistance for needy families, what we used to call welfare, and unemployment insurance. Rebecca and her MEPC colleagues successfully fought to ensure that homeowners with low incomes were included in Mississippi's Hurricane Recovery Grant Program, not just the casinos and resorts that some of the state leadership were trying to direct that money toward. As executive director, Rebecca Dixon has helped NELP to truly integrate an anti-racist framework to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion. Her leadership represents a new era in the organization's storied history as she helps to reshape NELP into not just a stronger workers' rights movement, but one that is simultaneously working to dismantle structural racism as part of what is necessary to eliminate economic inequality and build worker power. It is my honor to introduce one of this year's recipients of the RDI Human Rights Awards, Rebecca Dixon.
Good evening, and thank you for that introduction, Annalise. And thank you to the Rights and Democracy Institute for this beautiful award, which I am honored to accept on behalf of my organization and colleagues at NELP. We are honored by this award and even more honored to share space with such amazing leaders and put people and planet first and demand bold structural changes for racial and economic justice. I want to start with a story of one of my first experiences of organizing in collective action. So I grew up in a very small town in rural Southwest Mississippi called Brookhaven. And up until 1970, Brookhaven's school system was segregated. And even though we had Brown v. Board of Education in 1954, they didn't desegregate the schools until 1970. And so when that happened, we had a an academy, Brookhaven Academy, which we call the Segregation Academy, was opened so that white families didn't have to send their kids to school with Black children. So fast forward to 1988, I'm about 12 years old. Brookhaven High School hired the football coach from the Segregation Academy. And you have to understand, Brookhaven is about 55% African American. And so with this history of segregation, Black people were really pissed off and they did something about it. So I remember sitting in one of the largest churches, Black churches in rural Mississippi, and it was standing room only. And we were all so upset that they had the audacity to do this and think that we were just going to take it. And what happened in that meeting was a plan to boycott the white businesses in the town. And after 12 weeks of boycotting, they actually rescinded the offer to the coach. So, you know, collective action, joining together really does equal power. So NELP is really clear about joining together. And our movement's work is really to make major shifts toward a multiracial democracy that is not dictated by racial capitalism, but rather shaped and reshaped to serve people's needs that are not billionaires and corporations. This year of all years has emphasized our interdependence with one another, and especially with frontline workers who are now and have always been inherently essential. We have fought this year and will continue to fight to ensure that this essential label is not used to excuse or as an excuse to coerce labor under unsafe conditions. As we've seen, too many employers and legislators and decades of racist policies are now converging to coerce labor under unsafe conditions with little or no benefits. Abuse of power is rampant in the US, and workplaces are no exception. Strengthening workplace democracy is fundamental to US democracy and human rights as a whole. Workers must feel free to challenge employers who abuse their power in the workplace without fear of retaliatory firings. Black and immigrant workers are fighting back because they are tired of being surveilled, silenced, and excluded, and we must remain in deep solidarity with them. The right for workers to speak out against arbitrary and discriminatory treatment and organize in their workplace must be protected, because that strengthens our democratic principles and our democracy. And because as a matter of racial justice, we are calling on these just cause protections that facilitate stability and racial equity that will benefit Black workers, immigrant workers, women, and all working people. Workers need a just transition from harmful institutions and economies to institutions and economies that prioritize health, healing, and justice. We value your solidarity, and you have ours as we conspire to ensure that democracy and human rights in the workplace and beyond. Thank you so much for this award. We look forward to fighting together to create an abundant future that we all deserve. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. That was amazing. Up next, we have Laura Lynch. Laura, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
You can, yes.
Okay, I'm ready. Hi, my name is Laura Lynch, and I am a member of the RDI board, as well as a member of the Leadership Committee for Rights and Democracy. We are at a point in history when rural organizing is some of the most neglected and most important priority for the project to turning this country around. I am here to introduce Rural Democracy Initiative, the other RDI, who we are honoring tonight. Rural Democracy Initiative was launched last year to support rural people working to transform rural America, and therefore the entire country, for decades to come. They connect rural organizers and advocates with funders and regional and national thought leaders in order to build the permanent, powerful civic and political infrastructure in rural communities and small cities that produce the policies and elected leaders needed for those communities to thrive. RDI consists of two funding collaborations, the 501c3 Heartland Fund and the 501c4 Rural Victory Fund in 2020. These funds invested over $15 million in 99 groups in the 19 states. Sarah James is the director of the Rural Democracy Initiative, and she also serves as a senior advisor to Committee on States coaching emerging donor alliances in states from Alaska to Alabama, and has advised the New Hampshire Progress Alliance since it was founded. Sarah previously served as executive director of Progress Alliance of Washington for 13 years. In this capacity, she helped found some of Washington State's most important civic engagement organizations. Sarah is known for leading innovative campaigns, integrating field experiments, digital platforms, and transformative narrative. An organizer at heart, Sarah has dedicated 25 years to working for shared prosperity, democracy, and a healthy environment. She grew up in a small town in rural Washington State and especially loves rivers and mountains. Living in a rural town myself is like having a very large family with lots of opinions. We may not always agree, but we work together to get things done. We may be small, but we have a very strong voice. And here in Temple, New Hampshire, we have proven this by working together to fight off pipelines as well as compressor stations. And we're now working together to bring renewable energy to all our municipal buildings and in the future for our whole town. I am honored to give out this award tonight to Rural Democracy Initiative and to Sarah James.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me? I want to thank you for this incredible honor to stand among these powerful leaders. And I'm especially touched because of the special connection I found in the New Hampshire activist community. Like Laura mentioned, I come from a small town in rural Washington State, and my dad was a non-union truck driver, and my mom did childcare and cleaned houses to make ends meet. And I got involved in activism when I was 11, when our family doctor authored our state's anti-abortion ballot initiative. This is the same doctor who delivered my brothers and who eventually I had to go to for birth control. And also our school board president mandated that all social studies be taught from the white European perspective, despite our school district including the Suquamish Reservation. Now, I live in Seattle, in actually what the Seattle Times determined is the most progressive precinct in the city of Seattle. And I'm also a donor collaborative director, and I spend a lot of my time, frankly, with multimillionaires. So I have personal experience with, first, how our corporate opposition profits when they stoke this urban-rural divide concept, as folks talked about earlier. And second, how my progressive colleagues lose by assuming that everyone in rural America is white and conservative. So we founded the Rural Democracy Initiative, the other RDI, because we have to transform what's possible in rural America in order to win the changes that we need in our country. We have to make an actual difference in the lives of real people who are struggling. And these are people who are Black and Indigenous and Latinx and Asian American. 20% of rural residents are actually people of color, alongside a bunch of white people who also really need to be organized. And we can only do this with permanent and powerful movement organizations like yours, supporting leaders like the folks here tonight. We've learned so much in the past year, which I'm dying to share, but I'm just going to leave you just with a few key points. Number one, rural margins matter. This is a C3 event, but just for background, I'll say the change in presidential margins in small cities and in the surrounding rural areas were determinative for winning in Georgia and Wisconsin and in Arizona and Pennsylvania. Second, the disconnect between rural people and progressives is not about policy. don't buy into this debate about whether we need to moderate. Rural people agree with us on issues, and they want somebody who's every bit as bold and as fierce as AOC on their side, but someone who has their backs and who is fighting for their rural hospital, their job, their farm, their drinking water. That's what they want. And third, we need to show up. Our exit polling showed that white rural people were the least engaged of any demographic by any organization or campaign in this last election. So I'm not telling you all what you don't already know. You embody these lessons. So I'll close by thanking you so much for sharing this vision with us and trailblazing the work with your brilliant deep canvas and your organizing and your local policy fights. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It's incredible to see, you know, the level of work that you've helped do in this country, getting resources for the kind of organizing that we do think is so critical to turn this country around. And you know, we are coming towards the final part of tonight, and it's just been so amazing to have the group of folks that we were able to honor tonight, with starting with Jordan and Erica and Tanisha and Stefan and Tabitha, Vicky, Rebecca, and Sarah. I mean, the collection of that work that you all have done for us locally, but also, you know, doing it around the country with NELP and the other RDI, you know, it's just been really incredible, and we're just so inspired to be partners with you all. I was just so thrilled to be able to have this conversation with Kathy, who's been one of my longtime mentors in this movement, with George and Alicia. You know, I am the conversation that we had there. I'm gonna have to watch it again. We're gonna put this out on video so we can share with folks who weren't able to come tonight. But just so much of what we're trying to do was encapsulated in that conversation. And I'm glad, I'm just so thankful. I get to work with the Rights and Democracy Institute board, and you all have seen the incredible folks that are on that board. And tonight, you know, we've been able to have, you know, you met Mary and Andrea, the two co-chairs, and Kathy that had that incredible conversation that we've been starting to also have those kind of conversations on the Traverse that we talked about, Safakor and Travin and Annalise and Laura. So I'm just about to introduce to three more board members that have been stepping up in so many ways. Lynn Merlone was one of the folks that worked with me the most to help organize this event, along with Mary Gannon. And then our treasurer of the Rights and Democracy Institute board, Perry Stockinger, has just been going above and above and above and beyond, helping us as an organization. So I'm just thrilled to introduce you to three people who often behind the scenes are really building this movement. So I think I'll turn it over first to Lynn.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lynn Merlone. I am the new member of Rights and Democracy Institute. I'm here to thank everybody for participating. Thank you to everyone who donated when you RSVP to this event. If you haven't donated yet, or if you're inspired to contribute even more, we just want to remind you that anyone who donates $30 or more will be receiving our special Solidarity PPE face mask. And if you donate $50 or more, we will have a copy of Alicia's new book for you. So thank you all very much for coming.
Harry, are you there?
I am, and I guess I'm up. So I'm the treasurer of the Rights and Democracy Institute board. And to everybody who's joined us tonight, and those who participated, and those who were honored, and also to all the unsung heroes of the movement, I just say thanks for all your good work during this no good, very bad year. I have a bit of a public service announcement. One of the obscure bits of the CARES Act is that for 2020 only, I think, for those who don't itemize your deductions on your income taxes, you actually get to take advantage of charitable contributions. In most cases, it relies on itemizing. But for this year, you actually get to take it off above the line, they call it. And so I just thought I'd mention it. I know that our one of our struggles is to get the rich to pay their fair share. But for those of us who aren't rich, we might as well do what we can to get a little bit of our piece of pie. And so I just thought I'd tell you that. And I'll turn it over to Mary Gannon.
Thanks, Perry. Glad you're talking about the money and not me. Hi, folks. Mary Gannon. I'm a relatively new member also to the Rights and Democracy Institute board, and I'm just so honored and humbled tonight to be here and being part of this event. I live in Winchester, New Hampshire, so a little shout out to Winchester. We're really happy to have some representation from the southeast corner of Cheshire County. So a couple things for everyone who already has Alicia's book, or who might be considering getting it tonight with a donation to Rights and Democracy, or supporting your local bookstore, putting a shout out to the bookstores. We are super excited to announce that Rights and Democracy Institute is planning on starting a reading group, a book discussion with the Purpose of Power with Alicia's book. So everyone who gets a book will receive an email about the book discussion events that we hope to be starting in January. And if you don't have the book through RAD, check the website and there'll be information about that for sure. I feel like we got a real taste of that tonight, so I'm super excited to be one of the facilitators for those discussions. We also want to invite you to stay tuned to learn more about Rights and Democracy's learning and skill building opportunities with our new leadership development initiative that is working to help build a new generation of organizers with the Grassroots Leadership Academy to support movement elected officials, public servants, and prospective future candidates for with the Catalyst Leadership and Collective Liberation workshops. I'm sorry, I'm reading off a script. There's so much there. It's so exciting. I'm reading this and thinking, oh my gosh, like there's so much good work that we can be involved in. So check that out as well if you're interested and want more information off of the website. I just have to say as a quick shout out, as a Rights and Democracy Institute board member, I feel like I just want to pause and give amazing shout outs and kudos to our amazing Rights and Democracy staff, the communications team, all these behind the scenes people, our organizers who went out and pushed to get people here tonight. All those folks who are behind the scenes that we often don't see with their efforts really make this event happen, but also support those of us who are engaged in this work. So it's really important that we make those folks visible. So just want to thank them and appreciate them. And we are lucky that we're going to close tonight with another song from the Resistance Revival Chorus of Vermont. Please enjoy. So much gratitude to all of you for your participation. What I'm leaving with tonight, one of my thoughts is joy is an act of resistance. So I really think this chorus piece is a nice way to take us out with a joyful closure and joyful closing. Thank you.
Sometimes games that we play, they could have good. Oh, I said, wait, wait, wait. Done fighting for love. Put down our clothes and let the open the door, take it outside, carry no burden, carry no burdens, and tell me no lie. I'm not afraid. Oh, now. Sometimes easy way is the only way. Oh, I said, wait, wait, wait. I'm fighting for love. We better put down and let the see another day. Oh, I said, now wait, wait, wait. Does it mean anymore? Who's there around? Only one. What I say. Time for a
Thank you all. Have an amazing evening.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Oh, it's been amazing already.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a great night.
Thank you. This has been so wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thanks. It was great.
You.
It was nice to see all of you guys tonight.
Thanks for joining, Maria.
No, thank you. You know, I put my beautiful dress on just to honor everyone who is honored tonight. Since I'm not going anywhere. I put one of my gala dresses just to be home.
You can rock that again for the legislators meeting on Saturday.
It was nice to see you guys. Bye.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too.
Oh, we just had one person just join. Probably dropped out and coming back in.
Definitely missed it.
All right, y'all. Thanks. It was great. Really powerful. Good work.
Bye, everybody.
Andrea.
Have a good night, everyone. Thank you so much.
Good night, all.
Kathy, it was so good to see your face, and it was just reminiscent of the Medicare for All forum where
That was a good one, wasn't it?
yeah, it's just so wonderful to have you like help facilitate a conversation. That's something that I'm glad is recorded because I want to come back to it and take notes and use like draw on it for inspiration.
Okay, well, thank you for that. They were pretty easy to facilitate. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Kathy.